what it really comes down to for me is the fact that minority groups are just repeatedly being demonized for simply existing. As a disabled woman, I am waking up every morning to find out that some other subset of my rights is systematically being stripped away. And I say this as someone who is relatively privileged and lucky in the sense that I have a safety net and a support system. I'm not going to end up immediately unhoused if something happens. And I'm not going to end up in an institution if I need care. And I still have access to the healthcare that I need. And I'm still able to put food on the table. But the circumstances are particularly dire for the disability community, especially for people who have multiple marginalized identities. And I'm just kind of watching the domino effect of how it's impacting people that I love and people that I care about. And right now, in this moment, at this time, in April of 2025, I am still safe, but who knows what's going to happen.
Hi, friends. This is Think Inclusive. I'm Tim Villegas. Who you just heard was Emily Ladau, someone that I'm proud to call a friend for over a decade. She's a lot of things: an activist, a writer, a speaker. Most recently, she is editor of Able News, which amplifies the perspectives of New York's diverse, vibrant disability community, and serving as a resource throughout the state. But she does so much more. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We appreciate each and every one of you listening to or watching Think Inclusive, MCIE's podcast that brings you conversations with people doing the work of inclusion in the real world. And while you're here, make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you are so that you can keep Think Inclusive in your feed. In this episode of Think Inclusive, Emily and I discuss the challenges of securing resources and employment for people with disabilities and emphasize the need for thoughtful communication to reach diverse audiences, including conservative politicians. We also explore effective allyship, highlighting the importance of self-care and strategic advocacy. Before we get into my conversation with Emily, I want to tell you about our sponsor for this season, IXL. IXL is a fantastic all-in-one platform designed for K-12 education. It helps boost student achievement, empowers teachers, and tracks progress seamlessly. Imagine having a tool that simplifies what usually requires dozens of different resources. Well, that's IXL. As students practice, IXL adapts to their individual needs, ensuring they're both supported and challenged. Plus, each learner receives a personalized learning plan to effectively address any knowledge gaps. Interested in learning more? Visit ixl.com/inclusive. That's ixl.com/inclusive. All right, after a short break, we'll get into my conversation with Emily Ladau. Catch you on the other side. Emily Ladau, welcome to the Think Inclusive podcast.
Thank you. I am happy to be back.
Emily, what is new with you? I do know, because I follow you on social media, that you just got engaged. So congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's kind of wild, but next month I'll have been engaged for a year, but it still counts as just being engaged. I have been not quite adjusting to saying fiance instead of boyfriend yet. So it's funny.
Has it really been almost a year? Oh my gosh.
Well, the
Oh
thing is,
my
I don't
gosh.
post a lot on social media. So, like, if you look at my social media, it's pretty high up there. So, literally every time I go somewhere, people are like, "You just got engaged, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, May of last year."
Oh
But
my goodness.
it's so literally you and everybody else. It's really funny. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of the fun personal update. But in terms of everything else, it's I guess this is so cliche, but work hard, try to play hard, but mostly work hard right now.
And and you are with Able magazine, is that right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. So I in gosh, it's been about a year or so of that now too, a year and a half. In January of last year, I started with Able News, and we are a monthly digital newspaper that focuses on amplifying diverse perspectives from across the disability community, offering news, op eds, features, reporting on what's impacting the disability community, and then also featuring arts, culture, sports, community events, things like that. That's been kind of the primary gig for me right now, but
Okay.
I always like to be up to a lot of things at once, so that's only one thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you have lots of other things. And then Able News, is that a free resource for that anyone can access, or is it a subscription, or like how does that work?
So it is subscription based, and it's always one of those things where it's so challenging because I know that asking people for any kind of money seems a little bit difficult when you're talking about disability resources. However, the reality is that we also need to pay our writers, and our writers are primarily people with disabilities. So, in order to make sure that we are providing for the people who are providing for us, we do charge a small subscription fee. It's $18 for an entire year of
Oh
issues.
yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's, you
so
know,
it's small, but I think what's so important for people to recognize is that there are incredible disabled writers who are behind this, who are doing the original reporting, who are out there going to events, getting interviews, being resources for the community. So I love working with our writers because they just are incredible storytellers and reporters.
great, great. And we'll make sure to put that link in the show notes. And
Thank you.
I know a lot of people are looking, especially right now, for quality reporting, reporting that really focuses on a disabled perspective. So I think our audience would really find that valuable. So amazing. Did you have something to say? I didn't want to
Oh
cut you
no,
off.
I was just gonna say, I think there is a hunger for that right now.
Yeah.
I know that there is so much going on every 5 seconds in the news cycle, and finding someone to say, here's what's happening and here's how it's going to impact the disability community is really important. And there are certainly some great resources out there, but I think that unfortunately for the disability community, it's still few and far between.
Absolutely. What is on top of mind for you right now in this moment? We're recording in April, early April of 2025. And like you said, there's so much going on. It changes minute by minute. So, we're not doing any sort of breaking news here, but it's just what is consuming your thoughts right now?
Gosh, what isn't consuming my thoughts right now when I look at this cycle of everything that's happening? But I think that what it really comes down to for me is the fact that minority groups are just repeatedly being demonized for simply existing. And as a disabled woman, I am waking up every morning to find out that some other subset of my rights is systematically being stripped away. And I say this as someone who is relatively privileged and lucky in the sense that I have a safety net and a support system. And I am someone who comes from a degree of privilege in the sense that I'm not going to end up immediately unhoused if something happens. And I'm not going to end up in an institution if I need care. And I still have access to the healthcare that I need. And I'm still able to put food on the table. But the circumstances are particularly dire for the disability community, especially for people who have multiple marginalized identities. And I'm just kind of watching the domino effect of how it's impacting people that I love and people that I care about, whose, savings are being wiped out and who are not sure how they're going to access the care that they need or be able to live safely in their homes and communities, who are losing job opportunities. So it's scary and it's dire. And right now, in this moment, at this time, in April of 2025, I am still safe, but who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, same. As an organization, we are paying attention to what's going on, and in at least in Maryland, our funding has not been in jeopardy yet. So there's always that yet. But we've had to make some decisions about certain things, so that's really, really difficult. You and I are just two people, right? Like we're talking about millions of people in our country that are making those decisions every single day and figuring out what to do. So it's a really difficult time right now. And I'm wondering about just the disability community in general. Like, do you have any sort of story or example of someone that's close to you that has been really affected by what's going on? I know this is a putting you on the spot. So if you don't, that's fine. We can cut this. But if anything comes to
Yeah,
mind.
I mean, there are so many people who I know already who have lost their jobs, and in particular, jobs that pertain to accessibility and to
Mm,
diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And so many people who are doing great work in the federal government to ensure that the legislation that has been put in place to protect the rights of people with disabilities was actually upheld and implemented are the people whose jobs have already been taken away. And even just on a personal level, it's impacted work opportunities for me. And it's definitely become a game almost of how do I say that I'm working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility without actually using any of those words. And so again, it seems like a minor thing, but so many people who have poured their hearts, their souls, and their lives into this are now scrambling to find employment. It's not even just an example of one person. It's so many people that I know who have been doing amazing work to protect the rights of the disability community. And now every day that I'm on LinkedIn, I see that these amazing people are looking for work, and that hurts my heart for sure.
yeah, and it's like organizations and corporations are in a very tough spot because you have these executive orders coming out from the Trump administration, targeting these DEI initiatives, right? But it's so vague. It's like I think I was reading something in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. I said that right? And it was something about they called it strategic vagueness, and I thought that was really interesting because everything that I've seen is this it seems to me, intentional vagueness, and it causes a lot of confusion and chaos, right? So everyone's like, well, what do I do? Like, how do we go forward? And so a lot of people are just making decisions about certain things and not really knowing how things will affect it, but have made decisions in advance, right? And that's what is so kind of upsetting to me is all these people's lives millions of people's lives are being impacted, but we haven't even seen the full impact, because some of these programs that are being, slashed, some judges are saying, oh, that you got to rehire them, or the administration is saying, oops, we didn't mean to do that, or so it's like, does anyone know what's going on? I don't think so.
And I think that the phrase strategic vagueness really resonates on the other side too, because if they are being strategically vague about what we can and cannot say, then the flip side of that is a lot of what I am doing is dealing in strategic vagueness, because if I'm not allowed to say accessibility, but I still mean accessibility, then I'm going to talk about how technology needs to be usable for everyone. And if I'm not allowed to say inclusion, then I'm going to say celebrating everyone in our community, right? And it means the same thing, but
Right.
if
Yeah.
we have to play the game right now, I'm playing the game. I don't want to, I don't like it, but that's what it's coming down to, is basically wordsmithing
Yeah.
to figure out what is okay to say, even though at the end of the day, we still mean what we were saying before all this was happening.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Do you mind if I bring up something you posted on Facebook about? I don't have it in front of me. So is it Representative Crockett? Is that right?
Yes.
In Texas, was it Texas?
Yeah. So basically, the short version of the story is
Uh-huh.
that Representative Crockett was talking at a human rights campaign dinner about Governor Abbott in Texas. And Governor Abbott is a wheelchair user, and she referred to him as Hot Wheels,
Hmm.
and called him a hot mess. And it created quite the little tizzy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite the little tizzy, because, if you're a wheelchair user and someone tells you that you have Hot Wheels, right? It's not taken too kindly.
It's such an interesting conversation, because on the one hand, I am truly kind of unbothered, and I think it's sort of the most tame possible thing that you can say. And I'm certainly no friend or fan of anyone who's just going along with the current administration. So I don't particularly worry about how Governor Abbott feels about all of this. But what I was concerned about is we have so much going on right now. Don't give people who are already trying to systematically strip our rights away anything else to work with when it
Yeah.
comes to the language that we use. That was really what my feelings came down to. I don't think saying Hot Wheels is so deeply offensive in the grand scheme of things. It's not. I think that what's more important is that we're being thoughtful about our language, because we want to make sure that under the umbrella of people who accept people with disabilities, that we do in fact show that we accept people with disabilities. But at the same time, Representative Crockett is a Black woman, and there were plenty of people who gleefully looked at it as an opportunity to go after her. And so there were clear undertones of racism there, even as we were
Absolutely.
asking her to be mindful of her language. And so it's a very nuanced and complicated conversation. But what it comes down to for me is words matter, but intent and impact also matters. And it also matters how we are responding.
Absolutely. Nuanced conversations, we love them around here. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because it just reminds me of all the times during the, Trump, like 1.0, where a lot of people, were attacking, his IQ, or, all these different ways to demean his intelligence, and I know that is such par for the course. Everyone seems to do it on social media. And it's just part of unfortunately, the vernacular of the insults that are going around. But it really just hurts any sort of legitimate criticism of Trump 1 or 2.0 when you are lowering yourself to say those things. It also happened with the Biden administration.
It's lazy criticism, in my opinion. It in no way actually gets to the heart of what is so problematic. It is instead using disability as an insult and sending a terrible message to people who have cognitive and intellectual and learning disabilities in the process. And it is just as easy to say that someone is a bad person. So why do we need to resort to saying that someone has a low IQ or that someone is dumb or that someone is stupid when we could easily say they are bad? Because to have a cognitive disability does not make you a bad person. And I think that we are so just careless with our language. And I know a lot of people say to me that I am too weighed down in all of the talk of words mattering and that we have much bigger issues going on because the world is on fire. So stop caring if someone says that Trump is dumb or has a low IQ. But you know what? I care very deeply because the reality is that we get further and further into the mess when we start devaluing and dehumanizing people who don't deserve to be dehumanized. And it's very simple to just work on changing our mindset. So when we mean that someone is a bad person, we say that they're a bad person and we don't say that they have a low IQ.
And you also, I think I'm very much where you are with words and their meaning and their intent. And I feel like, especially as someone who thinks about communication all the time, and that's the lens that I view news in, you have to draw a line somewhere. You know, you have to say, this is not okay. Like, I don't care if you disagree with this person, or if you like have all these emotions and you hate this person, you still don't say certain things. And otherwise you're just like anybody else. You know, like, what's going to set you apart as a communicator? Saying all those things it's not going to convince somebody to change their mind. I don't think I've ever, that I can't think of one example where that happened.
Yeah, because it doesn't. It just, feeds into the chaos and the media frenzy without actually contributing anything meaningful to the conversation. And the important thing for me to point out also is that I am not a fan of double standards. And so if we're going to hold one person to account, then we need to hold everyone to account. And by holding someone to account, I do not mean being a vicious, or racist attacker because you don't like what someone says. I mean saying, let's be mindful and let's do better. And that's applicable to everybody. And there's a difference in how a lot of people were responding to Representative Crockett in the sense that some people were just using it as an excuse to attack her as a person. And what I wanted to do was say, here's a learning opportunity. And I think that's where the distinction lies. And then the other thing to keep in mind is this is a problem regardless of what side of the aisle somebody is on. And people do not like when I bring this up, but back in, like 2009, maybe, President
Mhm.
Obama was on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and they were talking about bowling. And he was like, I bowled a 129. And, Jay Leno was like, oh, wow, that's so good. And it's not, it's a terrible bowling score. But, President Obama was like, yeah, I bowl like I'm in the Special Olympics or something.
Oh no.
And
Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Oh
And
no. Oh
I
my gosh.
think that got real buried real fast. People just like
Yeah.
tried to bury that. The sources are there. If you Google President Obama's Special Olympics comment, it will come up on all of the legitimate news sources. And I think that in and of itself is a reminder that I will get mad at you regardless of how much I agree with your
Right.
political views.
Oh my gosh, exactly. Oh my goodness. I think that's a good reminder. It's a good reminder. I think we all need to step back and think about that. So thanks for indulging me with that conversation.
Yeah, of course.
What about, as you are surveying what's going on, is there anything that gives you hope as we're in this really difficult space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't call myself an optimist right now, unfortunately. I would say I'm more of a realist, but in terms of what I have witnessed, there are so many incredible activists who, despite being just pelted with the horrors of what is happening every day, continue to show up and find ways to get their messages across. And I think that social media, for all of the negatives about it, has remained a beautiful thing because it's where I see people who are continuing to show up. And it's where I see people who are continuing to advocate and educate and get their message across. And I don't think we can overstate the importance of that right now. So I feel hopeful every time I open up Instagram, and luckily have trained the algorithm enough that I still see people who are speaking up, who are advocating, who are, getting out there and making a difference. And if I think about it long enough, I get sad because I realize that not everybody's algorithm looks like mine, of course. So I worry about being in an echo chamber. But I also know that these are the people who aren't just doing it on social media. They are doing it in their day-to-day lives. They are speaking up wherever they can. They're doing little acts of rebellion wherever they can. And I have to hold on to hope that we're just going to keep up that fight, even though we shouldn't have to. But I do feel hopeful every time I see people who are still pushing back, even in the face of everything.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was a teacher, this was when I first started Think Inclusive as a blog and podcast. And this was probably 2016. No, right before Trump was elected. And I was still employed by a school district, and I wrote a blog post, and like up and until that point, I started really being like online in 2012. So like not when you first get online, you're like, I don't know, like what I'm doing. I'm just going to write stuff and like be on social media or whatever. And I had a cause, and I'm promoting inclusive education, and I wrote a post about how Donald Trump was bad for people with disabilities, like full stop, like it's bad, and like you shouldn't vote for him. And I took a stand, and I remember the absolute pushback I got from, like in the comments section and emails and on social media, because I had never taken any sort of political stance, because it was kind of like out of my wheelhouse. Like I wasn't used to putting my feet into any of that before. And plus I felt like I was a public school employee, and I don't know. I know people still feel like, well, if I work for a school district, I can't be political, which is not true. But I know people feel that way, and they're worried for their job, and I get that. So totally get it. But so since that point, I've always been really careful about how much of what I really put out there. I've been more mindful, right? And even with my job here, it's always been like trying to have a balance, because I don't like if I'm saying something on my personal page, I'm not representing the organization, because we are nonpartisan. But this time around, Emily, I'm just like, I have no choice. But to just completely lay it all out there. Like I almost feel a regret for not doing it sooner. You know what I mean? Not that my voice would necessarily have tipped any sort of balance, but because I was having these conversations with people, and like, internally we're trying to figure out like, what do we do? How do we respond and stuff? So I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Deeply. And I always say that when I am speaking for myself, because I don't represent the whole of the disability community. And this message was something that I was sharing long before I was being more vocal about my views. I would say, if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. And that is not my saying. That is something that many people with different types of disabilities have been saying for years. But it's a reminder that I share because I want people to understand that no matter what, there's no way that I can speak for a population of 1 billion plus people. That being said, when I see that population of 1 billion plus people is so deeply at risk, I feel like I have to say something. And even though what I'm saying is only representative of my own views, I am concerned for the whole of a community at this point. And I worry at some point that something that I say is going to come back in a way that ultimately harms me, but at least I will know that I have stayed true to myself. And it's a scary thing. But at the same time, what you said is very true about being mindful about how you're putting yourself out there. And I am very thoughtful about every single word that I put out there because I know that at the end of the day, I could easily alienate the same people who I am trying very, very hard to win back over. And so if I can just find a way to toe the line, some people think, oh, well, you're just pandering to people. No, it's not about pandering anymore. It's about how can I communicate in a way that discusses the seriousness of what's going on while also maybe not alienating people who I really need to rein back in. And it's a constant balance that I'm trying to figure out. But when my book came out, for example, there were plenty of people who were like, this is ridiculous. You just wrote this to a non-disabled audience, and you clearly don't actually care about the disability community because you're, again, pandering to them. And now I have to laugh because it's like, no, I'm not. This is where we are. This is the kind of communication that we need to be doing right now. We need to be thinking about every single word that we say and how it is going to land with people. So yeah, it's such a a dance, really.
It is a dance. It is a dance. And that reminds me of something. So I was down covering a story. I live in Georgia, you know that, but just as a reminder, if anyone doesn't know, I live in the Atlanta metro area, and I went down to the Georgia State Capitol to cover a story of a parent who has been advocating with their state senator for inclusive practices. And so I went down and I was in the conversation and listening and taking notes and all that stuff. And I was surprised at like how the state senator had no clue that a family with a child with a disability could go to an IEP and the school district say, sorry, we can't serve your child in your neighborhood school. They have to go 5-10 miles down the road to practically across the city to another school to serve them because we don't teach those kids in this school. Had no clue. Zero clue that happens. And it's like, and so what I was telling him, the senator, was, I'm like, yeah, this is just one story. Like, you think about, there's over 100 counties, I think, in Georgia. Like, it happens everywhere, every state, every city, every county. That this is a very, very common story. And this senator happened to be a Republican, a conservative. And to them, they were appalled because it's a parents' rights issue. And so it made me think, I'm like, I wonder if, because he talked about pandering, I'm like, I wonder if there's a way to communicate certain ideas that really take into consideration the values and the issues that are most on top of mind for conservatives,
Yeah.
and make them care about something. You know what I mean? There's something there. I'm not exactly sure how to do that, but I was reminded that every time I've said this to somebody and they're of a particular political persuasion, it completely infuriates them. And I'm like, wow, I guess I should be talking about this more often.
Yeah. I mean, that is the perfect case in point for what I am talking about. I am a passionate believer in disability rights and justice. And I also know that if you go into any conservative politician's office and start talking about ableism and disability rights and justice, you're going to lose them so
Right.
fast. They will show you the door before you even sat at the table. And I hate that. And I also know that that's the reality. So if you are talking to a certain group, know your audience. And that is perhaps the best skill that I have learned in my years in communications and advocacy is know your audience, because it is one thing to use certain language in the bubbles that you are in, and it is another thing entirely to communicate with people who are not existing day to day in those bubbles. And if you want to bring them into your cause instead of alienating them, you might need to do things that feel like pandering.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, I do what, like, I know that you wouldn't necessarily characterize that as pandering. And so I wonder if we can reframe it and say, you're really communicating to somebody at their at their core values, like trying to find common ground, because it, like,
Sure.
again, it's something that I am passionate about. This is wrong. Like, you should not have to send your child across the city to another school to be educated. Like, full stop. It shouldn't happen. It happens all the time. The law even like allows it, basically, because whatever we can get, that's another podcast episode, but like, it shouldn't happen. But just bringing that up to somebody that also would care about that, I think, is a way to build common ground. And I think we need way more of that.
Oh, yeah. I always say it's about meeting people where they're at, not where you're at, but where they're at.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. What advice would you give people who want to be allies right now? Like, again, this, our audience is mostly educators. We do have disabled advocates and activists that listen, and we also have parents who have children with disabilities. But do you have any general advice for allies?
Figure out what is within your capacity to do right now and do that. The weight of all of this is on no single person's shoulders. But if you have the capacity to make a phone call to your elected officials, if you have the capacity to use one of those pre-written email templates and send out an email, if you have the capacity to post on social media, or maybe one day you don't have the capacity and all you need to do is just take a break, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and the work is going to be here when you're ready. That doesn't mean ignore the work. It just means take care of you. And then the next day, if you feel like you can send that email, make that phone call, show up to that protest, post on social media, whatever it is you feel you can do that.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for that. And, thank you for being here and chatting about communications. I think that that's really like it. I don't know about you. I think we're biased, or I'm biased, but communications is like the thing.
I'm right there with you on the bias. I mean, considering that I have devoted my life to strategic communications at this point, yes, I think communication is the thing.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why we're here, where we are. It's messaging and communication.
Absolutely.
All right, so I like to end our episodes with a mystery question, and these ones most recently are written by my 12-year-old daughter, Imogen, and she is our biggest fan. She listens to almost every episode. Here we go. This is just something from a 12-year-old mind. Here we go. So what is your go-to karaoke song? Here we
Oh,
go.
gosh. Good question. I love that. Good question. I'm trying to think of what I am most likely to belt out in the car. And at the moment, it is the version of It's My Life from the Broadway show and Juliet.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Yes. It's my who's the
Bon
uh
Jovi.
Bon
I don't know
Jovi,
that I would
that's
call that my
right.
go-to karaoke song, but if I'm in the car, I will sing it extremely loudly. So I suppose it's my car karaoke song.
What's that one? Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up. It's one that my wife and I sing all the time. It's that Bright Eyes song. Hold on. Total Eclipse of the Heart. There we go.
Oh,
By
of
Bonnie
course.
Tyler. Yes,
Of
yes.
course.
Yeah, I'm not like a huge karaoke person. Like it's not my favorite thing to do, but I'll usually, if there's a chance to do like a duet, I'm fine with that. I'm
Oh
fine
yeah.
with
Well,
that.
and I don't know. It sounds like your daughter might be saying she wants you to lean into the karaoke a little. So
Yeah. I know. I wonder what hers. She's been listening to a lot of Gracie Abrams. Have you ever heard of Gracie Abrams?
I think I know maybe one song.
Okay, yeah, it's like my whole family loves Gracie Abrams right now. I mean, everyone loves Taylor, right? That I guess Gracie went on tour with her or something, and so now it's all. And then she's J.J. Abrams' daughter, which again is like wild to me, like where how things happen or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah. So that's some of her favorite music. So I get to listen to that.
Well, that's a fun way to wrap up.
Emily Ladau, thank you so much for being on the Think Inclusive podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Loved being here. Thank you for having me.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Think Inclusive. Now, let's roll the credits. Think Inclusive is brought to you by me, Tim Villegas. I handle the writing, editing, design, mixing, and mastering. This podcast is a proud production of the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education. Our original music is by Miles Credich, with additional tunes by Melody. A big shout out to our sponsor, IXL. Check them out at ixl.com/inclusive. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who tunes in. We'd love to hear how you're using our episodes. Are they part of your teaching toolkit? Are you sharing them with school administrators? Drop me a line at tvillegas@mcie.org. That's tvillegas@mcie.org, and let me know. And hey, if you're still with us this far into the episode, it probably means you love Think Inclusive and the work MCIE is doing. Can I ask a small favor? Help us keep the momentum going by donating at our website, mcie.org. Just click the button at the top of the site and chip in $5, $10, $20. It would mean the world to us and the children in the schools and districts we partner with. Thanks so much for your time and attention, and remember, inclusion always works. From MCIE.